I prefaced this story in our tease yesterday by saying, here's some good news, or here's more good news for you. Canada's cemeteries, obviously tongue-in-cheek, are running out of space. I think it's fair to say that's not a headline you thought you'd be running into anytime soon, but that's apparently, in fact, what's going on. And maybe shouldn't come as a big surprise, although it turns out, according to our next guest, most Canadians had no idea this was happening. Amanda Kelly is co-founder of Awake. That's a company that offers affordable, eco-friendly funeral alternatives in Canada. She is on the line. Thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let me begin by asking, as I said, I don't think that's a headline people might have expected to see. Canada or Canadian cemeteries are running out of space?
Yeah, you're right. It's something that a lot of us, I think, spend most of our lives trying not to think about.
True. So what does this mean? First of all, is this something that you would have imagined we'd seen this coming for a while, no?
Yeah, so studying the history of cemeteries is kind of interesting. The way that we as a society think of a cemetery is a model that's been around for about 150 years here in Canada and hadn't really been given the opportunity to change that much since that time. They're still organized primarily based on plot systems with a certain amount of space, and the plots are being used up, and that leads to challenges when it comes to ongoing maintenance and operations of those cemeteries, and also our growing communities and what each of us as Canadians are looking for our final resting places.
Yeah, you actually used the word in the article I read that says our cemeteries are in crisis right now. And then you mentioned something that I'd never considered as well, and that is the Canadians, you suggest, are looking for greener alternatives. I thought this was about as green as you can get, so why am I so wrong here?
Yeah, so going back to the word crisis, there's a trend happening in cemeteries across Canada that, again, many of us are not aware of until we're suddenly faced with it. And that is that as these traditional burial spaces in our cemeteries start to become full and space becomes not available in a cemetery, that means that that cemetery is also now going to be challenged with generating revenue to support their ongoing operations and their ongoing maintenance. And there are some checks and balances in place, of course, with our excellent regulation systems for cemeteries across the country. But what we're seeing is that a lot of cemeteries who are in this position are having to turn over their ownership and their operations and surrender their properties essentially to the local government, which means that our local governments are having to take on the management of a lot more cemeteries than they even ever saw coming.
So, okay, that's the crisis part of it. The issue, as I said, with green, I mean, you're burying someone traditionally in a plot. Are there Canadians beyond cremation? What other alternatives are there?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different choices that we as consumers can make for our final resting places. And, one plotted burial is not always the same as another plot style of burial. There's different types of caskets that can be either biodegradable or even made of fabrics. There are some plots that require concrete liners at the bottom of them, and some that are simply built and dug directly into the ground. The option that we have developed and that we are working with some incredible cemeteries across the country on are what we call infinity gardens. And our infinity gardens are essentially an alternative option for burial plots for cremation. Ashes are laid to rest in a community garden space where they return to earth and regenerate the earth. And we do that with the help of soil science.
So you're talking about simply the ashes and the whole idea about, your standard coffin, et cetera. That's not part of what you do.
We specialize specifically in cremation ash interments, and we do that for a reason, because what people don't realize is over 3/4 of us here in Canada choose cremation for our final disposition. And in Quebec, that number is actually over 80%. So over 80% of residents in the province will ultimately choose cremation. And that leaves cemeteries as well as families with a question of how we'd like to lay those remains to rest, either using a plotted system that was developed 150 years ago for a full body burial, or using an alternative method.
So, I mean, I hate to ask, but, we're talking about something that people, as you said off the top, don't want to have to think of till they have to think of it. Is there a cost factor involved here?
Yes. So as anyone who has owned acreage in their lifetimes can attest to, maintaining properties is expensive, and that's part of the crisis that cemeteries faced is the cost to maintain those beautiful community spaces in perpetuity. The beauty of our infinity gardens is that because they're not based on allocated sized plots, it allows cemeteries to use a much smaller designation of space, often underneath a beautiful tree or in a place where they couldn't otherwise have put caskets anyways. And it allows them to dedicate that space for a garden that can fit far, far more many memorials than a traditional plot. So that means the cost to maintain that space is much less over time, and it means the cost for families to seek memorials in those spaces is therefore less as well.
Okay, one other thing, and again, because I don't know a whole lot about this, I'm sure most people listening perhaps don't know that, but I understand as well, when you talk about cremation, the ashes, right, are generally toxic, right, when you plant them in the ground, like to plants, for example. So when you talk about cremation, how do you solve that issue?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Cremated remains have the pH level of bleach at 11.8. They also have the equivalent of 2 cups of table salt per full urn of ashes. So obviously these are really challenging circumstances for plants to overcome and can often be fatal to our gardens and to our plants. So the way that we address that is we have a patented soil blend that we use in our gardens that lowers the pH. It provides the exact properties so that the salinity of the ash content can drain out of the garden in a particular way. And then it balances 22 different micronutrient levels of those remains so that they can become available to the root systems of the plants and the ecosystem so they can actually regenerate and incorporate into the earth.
Wow. The things you learn on this show. Okay, your company is called Awake, right?
It is, yeah.
And you operate out of Ontario?
We operate out of Ontario. We recently secured a federal grant to expand into BC and Alberta, and we are looking to move eastwards as well.
Okay, you don't work with any other like for example, in Quebec, you're not working with another company. You're looking to actually expand your business here if and when you can.
We work with cemetery partners. So any cemeteries that are challenged with finding eco-friendly cremation options for their communities or for their families, or any cemeteries who are challenged with space or who are looking for alternate burial options. We work with them all across the country.
Well, listen, thank you for the education today. I did not know much of what we discussed, and I wish you luck and appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Aaron. It's an important subject, and I'm happy to come and talk about it.
Amanda Kelly, the company is called Awake, a company that offers affordable, eco-friendly funeral alternatives in Canada because we're running out of traditional cemetery space.